Today's faction focus is on the
Adeptus Custodes.
and GW didn't give us any big surprises here, which in the case of the Custodes was something I was hoping for. Well, let's take a look. Their army rule is martial kata. The Adeptus Custodes are still masters of karate. Here is where I was hoping for a bit of surprise. In any case, the good news here is the karates have been streamlined for 10th edition, no longer forced to fit in the template of 9th edition's Necron's command protocols, though they are now restricted to fight phase interactions, and are activated in the fight phase. So while the old karates had more applications in different phases, new karates can be teched into on your enemy's fight phase and yours, so you no longer have to pick one stance for the round, and they aren't limited to once per game. I'd say it's a mechanical win. And you have 3 stances to choose from. Captaris, giving enemies melee attacks -1 to hit against your units. Dakatari, which gives your units sustained hits. And Rendax, which provides your units lethal hits. Look, this new karate system is certainly better, but I still find it awkward as hell that every unit in your army must adhere to the same karate stance uniformly. Not only is this less flexible for play, but I'd argue it's less thematic, making the Custodes' behavior more similar to a Tyrannid synaptic imperative, which is weird. It's not what I would have preferred, but it is what it is. The preview gives us their detachment as well. The Adeptus Custodes detachment rule is the generically titled Shield Host. It provides the army rule, Aegis of the Emperor, which simply provides them a 4-up feel no pain against mortal wounds. And while I am throwing a wee bit of shade here, it looks to be a fine ability. As you'll see, the Custodes have only become tougher, and while mortal wounds seem to be less available to build into directly for most armies, we have seen devastating wounds seems to be available quite commonly, so this 4-up feel no pain to mortal wounds will still remain valuable. Annoyingly, we don't get the emblematic battle line unit on preview. We do, however, got the big cheese of the Custodes, and Trajan is no slouch. And I think his stat line is likely going to be what the standard Custodian Guard sits at. Offensively, he's got his Watcher's Axe, which is now an assault weapon with flat 2 attacks. Nice quality of life change there. But a big change is its stat line. It's gained a point of AP and damage, which feels appropriate for a unique variant of a weapon type which are already supposed to be mastercrafted. The Watcher's Axe melee profile has lost a point of AP from its 9th edition stat line, but I think it's important to keep in mind the context of the AP deflation of this new edition. And compared to regular Castellan axes, that AP2 is a big deal. And on the ability front, Trajan has some boss man big money abilities. Captain General allows a unit he's leading to ignore any modifiers to characteristics or rolls or tests made for models in that unit, excluding saving throws, as ignoring enemy AP would be stupid. But even so, this is a crazy good ability, ensuring your superior performance remains intact regardless of enemy abilities, and it ensures that unit's leadership isn't messed with. And Moment Shackle transitions nicely into the big new cheese activate one of these abilities type of ability. Perhaps it was Trajan who served as the template for this. Regardless, Trajan's selections aren't choose one per command phase like with the other big cheeses, they remain once per battle. And to shore that up, the abilities are very potent. Either double Trajan's attack output in melee, or give Trajan an incredible 2-up invulnerable save, or give models in this unit fight first. Tremendous. Then we get a preview of Alaris Custodians. We can see relative to Trajan, they have 1 less movement but 1 more toughness. T7 Terminators. I'd also take their wounds to mean standard Custodian Guard will have 3 wounds base and leadership 6. A little weird a Custodian Guard has the same leadership as an Astartes, since they are, to a Space Marine, what Space Marines are to mortal men, but I guess it's a concession to ensure Battleshock is functioning as intended. Looking at their war gear, we can see where the common weaponry sits. The shooting of the Castellan Axe and the Guardian Spear remains at that mastercrafted boltgun standard from 9th edition. But like Trajan's Axe, they are assault weapons with flat 2 attacks, and their ballistic grenade launchers have been tuned down considerably, dropping a point of strength and 2 points of AP, but are now D6 shots instead of D3. And on the melee front we can see some reframing of the weapon standards, which I think is mostly for the better. For starters, the Castellan Axe is now a strength 9 weapon with the standard -1 axe AP, but it importantly hits hard at damage 3. That is all fine and in my mind is digestible. What isn't as so is that the Castellan Axe has not only an unwieldy weapon skill, but it also has one less attack. It ought to be either, and not both, and in my opinion it should be one less attack. It's a mighty heavy weapon, so it can't make the same amount of attacks as a swifter one, but the wielder, a custodian in this case, is no less skilled with the weapon of his choice. But I digress. And wrapping up the war gear, we can see Misericordias aren't a 1 extra attack per weapon anymore, instead offering a less potent profile with more volume for axe users, which is fine. Admittedly, the Alaris have 2 very cool abilities. Slayers of Tyrants returns now as an ability which allows them to reroll wounds versus characters, but also now against monsters and vehicles. To me, this reads as a thought-through ability, ensuring that an army which is more skewed towards infantry, which is also more skewed towards melee, can maintain efficacy in the new toughness standard applying to many vehicles. The access to lethal hits through Rendax does supplement this already, but it creates a stronger specialty for the Alaris Custodians, which is great when so many units in the army are infantry with similar combat performance using similar weaponry. It's their abilities which will define them, and I think that's a good design philosophy for the Custodes given the limitations of their range. And from the Golden Light gives the unit powerful flexibility. Once per game at the end of your opponent's turn, if an Alaris Custodian unit is not in combat, you can pull that unit into reserves and set it up on your upcoming turn. Tremendous. It's gonna feel great to fight out of combat on your opponent's turn only to relocate elsewhere. And under war gear abilities, we can see the Custodes Vexillas are now a war gear option for units, increasing their objective control by 1. Sure, losing the defensive options does hurt, but I think this new iteration of Custodes will have a more dynamic and interactive presence, which is a win for game feel, and I think we can all agree it's good to see the egregious layers of defensive buffs are not present, or at least seem to be reduced in 10th edition. And uniquely, we get a 3rd datasheet on Preview, a battle line unit, though not the one I would have liked to see. We have Prosecutors. They have a suitable stat line compared to Battle Sisters, but with better leadership. Their abilities are what is most noteworthy. Daughters of the Abyss provides them with a 3-up Feel No Pain against psychic attacks, and Purity of Execution gives them precision and devastating wounds when attacking a Psyker unit, allowing them to uniquely threaten Psykers within units. In the weapon spotlight we have the Executioner Greatblade, which has a rule which I feel goes a long way towards justifying it. It's no longer just a really strong power sword. It is now also an appropriate anti-Psyker weapon, achieved by using the ability tag combo of anti-Psyker and devastating wounds, to allow its attacks to threaten enemy Psykers to a much greater efficacy. Wound rolls of 4+ now count as critical hits, which in turn deals the weapon's damage as mortal wounds. And since all units now benefit from Karates, Vigilators under Dakatari ought to threaten enemy Psykers with a modest amount of reliability. And in the stratagem preview is the Shield Host Detachment stratagem Vigil Unending, allowing you to add a destroyed model back to a unit with its full wounds remaining for 1 command point. Bringing back an elite warrior like a Custodian is certainly a potent stratagem for 1 CP, and considering you get a command point in your command phase, you'll always be able to use it. And so it has a restriction where it can only be used on the same unit once per battle, which ought to rein it in. And that's a wrap on this one. I'll try to keep my subjective bias in check. I think it's a good preview, even though the Custodes haven't taken the form I would have liked to see. Karates are more streamlined, though still thematically awkward, and the detachment rule is simple but impactful. The biggest objective letdown in my eyes is not showing us the premier battle line unit, Custodian Guards. So I'd give this one a 6 out of 10, as I am very curious what abilities they would have, and how that interacts with their army rule to ensure they are valuable. Thinking on it, I'd guess sticky objectives are a likely possibility. But here's hoping there's enough there to ensure the Adeptus Custodes doesn't become an army of Flying Bike and Eagle Jump Pack spam. But I want to hear from you. What did you think of this faction focus?